This is the Florical podcast where we discuss industry technology, trends, and tell great stories. I want to talk a little bit about Florical. There's a great story, right? It's been over 35 years in the making, and we've evolved with technology. Our products evolved with technology as we went. So maybe give us the story of Florical, where it started, how it started, and, maybe 5, 10, 20 years in the road, where we want to be, and where you see things changing.
Yeah, so Florical began in 1985. A software developer for a router uh, electronics company called Vital Systems. He was the senior software developer, and he decided to make one of his own products and start a separate company to start selling that product because he saw a need that no one was meeting, and that was creating a, a really a DVR. Um, Although his case was a tape, uh, you know, so a TVR, I guess. So he created a product called Time Shifter, and it allowed people to feed a live signal onto a bank of tape machines that his automation controlled, and they can put in how much delay they want before it spits that signal back out. So if I wanted to go on a 5 minute delay, I will put in the little terminal and say 5 minute, and have 4 or 5 tape machines set up to start recording bits and pieces and switching a little switcher and playing it out 5 minutes later perfectly. And and of course, to do that with a bank of tape machines actually started with 1 inch machines.
So not only do you need a lot of them, you need a lot of space.
You need a lot of space.
Yeah.
It was the largest DVR, in
Yeah.
history. But started that in 1985, and shortly thereafter created a product called Show Timer, which had a product called Validator, which for satellite feeds of content coming in, it would read the signal to know, hey, I'm in static, I'm in black. Oh, here's the slate. Here's bars and tone. And here's the start of the segment. So I will make a data entry that here's the start of segment one, here's the end of segment one, and et cetera, and auto time this show that's coming in on tape because it's 1985 and well at this time 1987. And so when I put up the reel to play that show back, it knows what time code where everything is, and there was a little terminal where you can cue and play it all back, and you wouldn't need somebody to have to requeue segments in between commercial breaks. So really innovative stuff. Again, it's meeting a need based upon workflow of what was needed for producing your content out there. And after that, he created a product in the DOS, operating system called AirBoss. And AirBoss was a playlist, a player um, to automate control tape machines, and eventually video servers came on the scene and started controlling video servers and
So
et
this
cetera, et
was
cetera.
this was in around 1989 in that
Yep.
area.
Yep.
Just about. I mean, this was pre-Louth, right?
Louth was creating what they did. They started in the industry creating an ingest from tape to tape, and creating the concept of master tapes or library tapes and et cetera to reduce the amount of storage for tapes. And because you'll get in a master reel that has like 10 commercials on it, a 1 inch reel or a 2 inch, whatever, and you would get in those tapes and you need to make playback tapes of the 15 commercials that's on this reel. I need to make individual commercial cassettes. And so Louth created that dub but then eventually they created a playlist.
But so that was, but that was later, because that's the first one that I ever remember hearing about as a playback, as a AirBoss type of functionality, and that was a couple years after that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were basically emerging around the same time. Both of them, Ken Louth and Jim Moneyhan, were, if you would, pioneers in the master control uh, playout space. And I mean, keep in mind, it's relatively few, but you can still walk into some really small market TV stations where the master control area is still manually ran. They're very, very, very few. Um, but I mean, we're not too far away from a world where you had in master control at any given time, you had 5 operators, you know, running the tape, splicing the tape, queuing up this. And then along came like a LMS machine from, or Panasonic, their M2 machines, or Sony Beta cart machine or their LMS machine to play back, beta cassette tapes, and to have like a little playlist of commercial breaks. Um, you know, all those started coming on the scene. Columbine had their, system, MCAS system that ran on the IBM's OS2 Warp or OS Warp, operating system. Um, so everybody's coming on the scene and creating master control automation to play back and orchestrate. It's really like a maestro orchestrating all the machines that's in, a master control to put a linear signal on the air.
So, take us back to when file-based workflows became predominant, and how did Florical integrate to that and innovate within that space?
Yeah. So, I mean, I actually, um, I started my television career in 1995, um, and in a little TV station in Huntington, West Virginia. And we ran all of our commercials from a beta cart machine. And I remember when we first got our Grass Valley profile video server, it held a total capacity of 3 hours worth of video, and it was extremely expensive. And essentially, because it only held 3 hours of content, um, we can only put so much commercial content on it. We didn't put programming content because it didn't hold as much. So it became a digital beta cart machine. Now, all the old tape machine engineers that knew how to clean the heads of the tape machines to keep them running, all the mechanics to keep, the beta cart machine from not getting stuck in their arms and so forth, of moving the cassettes in and out. They were very frustrated with a video server because if I want to play back just this one commercial, how do I reach in and grab that file? I can't. It's not in my hand. It's not in my hand. I can't just run across the room and shove it in a tape machine and put it on the air. They really had this challenge with this new technology, and so there was actually a bit of reluctance in the very beginning of adopting it. My cart machine is just fine, and I'm not going to change. And some were, yeah, I'm in 5 years to retirement. I'm not changing. It's like, so it was slow adoption in the beginning, but Florical, right from the very beginning, saw that as the future and started adopting and creating uh, tape to digital workflows, and making sure that I can, uh, create library tapes that have all of my, in one large 60-minute beta cassette. I can have all these commercials loaded on it, and I can have like 15 of them, and it's my entire commercial uh, library. And because I had small amount of space on a video server, I have this media asset management system called, at the time, it's called Spot Cacher, and Spot Cacher would make sure that I have the content needed for on-air playback. And if it needed a particular spot, it would tell you what master cart it was on, and you shove that cart into the VTR that it was controlling, and it automatically dubbed, queued up to the spot, and dubbed that spot into the server so it's there for playback.
So is this driven by the from the playlist, or was it driven
Yeah,
somebody that
so it
manually entered
so it
what
read the
was needed?
playlist. So other competing automation systems at the time would read the next, let's say, 50 events in the current on-air playlist, or the next 100 events, and you know that's where they would read, and which meant when you're limited just looking at the on-air playlist and the next 100 events, you can get into a situation where it's purging for space, something that's not within that 100 events, but it's going to be 101, and you're going to have to turn around and redub it back into the digital, file space. um, so archive, and that was tape, based. So you would constantly be redubbing. But Florical was really innovative at the time and created a true media asset management system that looked ahead. As many playlists as you have, let's say over a weekend, holiday weekend, you can have 5 playlists, and it would read all the assets that you had, and it would keep a record every time this cart number was played, how often it was played. So it determined it based on play rate, based upon whether it was a promo versus a commercial, and as far as the media type and et cetera. And it used all these calculations to determine when I need to purge for space, I'm purging the thing that doesn't play very often. It's most likely a promo, and it's larger files. It's a 2 minute versus a 4 second. It's taken up most space, and it only got played once in the past week. So it meant less redubbing, and you would think, wow, that doesn't really sound like much, but at the time, revolutionary. Just to even think on that level, that you're not thinking linear at that point. You're thinking more global and enterprise level. Um, So Florical continued to add very innovative products as the technology changed. They were always one step ahead of always having some sort of workflow as technology changed. And of course, the biggest sea change of technology was starting to um, create kind of a hub spoke relationship where I'm central casting. And there's several different ways to central cast, but Florical was one of the first software companies, master control automation software companies, to uh, create workflows specially for central casting, and that was a game changer as well.
So, where are we today? And what's your vision for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, again, we want to continue to innovate and look where the industry is going and try to stay one step ahead. Um, the road, I would say, is not as singular as it used to be. So I could accurately kind of predict, if I go back the past 30 years, I can predict that there's going to be a television station operating a channel, and here's a particular workflow it's going to have. um, it might be different technology, but it's still doing pretty much the same thing. And it was easier for me to predict in 5 years. Well, now we've hit uh, a multi fork in the road. I've got 6 different futures. Now, do we bet on just one?
Do you have a time stone so you can rewind time?
Yeah, I don't have a Doctor Strange time stone. I could probably, I'd love to use it and predict multiple futures. But I would say the importance of navigating this unpredictable future is your partners. And that's something that Florical's focused on almost from the inception, is that we never had the um, we never had kind of the culture of a vendor client relationship. We've always seen those who have purchased our products as partners for the future, and that's been very important for us because we need to be in tune with your needs, and we need to be in, helping you remain innovative. We It's really difficult as a software developer. You don't want to get into a position where you ask the customer, "Hey, what do you think you need in the next 5 years so we can develop it?" They, they rarely can articulate, because most people can only articulate based upon what you know. I mean, go back 200 years and have somebody to try to describe a flying machine. They're going to draw some sort of bird feather thing, or Leonardo da Vinci, some whirly little fan that kind of pull somebody up, or bunch of balloons. They're not going to fathom 200 years ago what a 747 looks like and how it's going to
Or even
operate.
with an internal combustion engine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rockets
Yeah.
and all that stuff. It's like most people cannot articulate the future because they can only articulate what they know. The world of a software development company is, we actually have to create a future that nobody's seen before, create products of something that doesn't exist, and hope we get it right, and we can use lessons learned. We can say, okay, well, there is some patterns being formed here, and let's stay just one step ahead. So, um, like I said, there's about 5 or 6 different forks in the road right now of potential future. Are we all OTT? Are we all, you know, what is the effect of ATSC 3.0? How much is that going to play? And what are some of the side processes that need to be integrated within the workflow? What are those side processes? I mean, there's still quite a bit of arguments out there of the necessity of 3.0. Several companies have jumped on board, advocates for it, pushing it, doing lots of different experimentation. But what's the consumer appeal to 3.0? And what are some of the processes that they're going to want and demand, um, that you need to have available from your software partners to provide? So there's a number of factors looking at the future. It's been more split than any other time in history, um, which means your partnerships that you have become more critical to walk this uncertain and unpredictable future together.
That's interesting. Now, Ron, this is a question. In the past, you've been here for about 8 years, right, with Florcal, give or take. How have you seen the consumers, demeanor and approach to buying change um, in the last, with the evolution of ATSC and all the other standards that came?
Well, I think the biggest change actually started somewhat before then, but the consolidation of stations into larger and larger groups, which kind of centralize those decisions of what's coming next for a larger number of stations. And I think that's been a large impact, because you're getting a smaller number of people's input as to what's coming next, but the impact is so much greater because everybody's in the past, somebody saying we're going to do it this way, that might impact 2 or 3 stations or one station, and now somebody saying we're going to do it this way impacts 40, 50, 100 stations. And so there's a lot more at stake in making the right decisions, which also makes it harder for the decision makers to move, knowing that there's a lot at stake for how they decide to do this. But it just increases the need for that partnership to work with technology partners who can kind of walk that path, ask those questions, and kind of look at what comes next together in a way that makes sense to everybody, what can be done and what people want done.